Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out to the 31st Annual Florida Film Festival. This is our Filmmaker Forum. My name is Tim Anderson. I'm the programming coordinator here for the festival, and we've got a selection of 6 incredible filmmakers representing documentary features, narrative short films, and an international short film as well, who traveled all the way from Norway. So, yeah. Woo! I wish I was in Norway, where it's colder. We have a little clips package to show you just a little bit of each of their movies so that you can kind of get an idea of what they've made if you have seen it, if you haven't seen it. And then we'll come up on stage, we'll have a little conversation amongst ourselves that you can witness awkwardly. And then we will open up to you all, the crowd. You can ask anything you want. And we'll be doing that for up to the next 90 minutes. So thank you again so much for coming out. Hopefully you got some free coffee from Coterie Coffee outside. And I'll see you all in, say, 6 minutes, along with this incredible group of filmmakers.
Okay, you ready? Just do it. Don't take like. Okay. Oh shit! Sorry, wait. Oh my god. Wait.
Yeah, you just got stabbed.
Okay, you're fine. Okay, 3, 2, 1. What happened, Jay? What happened?
What happened?
What happened? I'm gonna
Do yourself right now.
What?
Just be quiet. Where?
I will be here.
Yeah,
Are you serious right now?
yeah, I
See, look at me.
was. Shut up. Just shut up. You shut up.
My daughter's gonna die. Thank you so much for letting Rebecca come with us. Liz really appreciates it. This is my brother Brandon. Brandon, how do you do?
Hi, Miss
Holtzman.
Holtzman. Nice to meet you. Your daughter is going to be super. The safest. She's going to be the safest with us. Be with us.
Yes.
Do you have a gland problem?
Yes.
No.
No.
He just likes me.
They feel good. It gets hot under the beanie sometimes, but I really like how it feels. So I keep it on.
A lot of sweat.
There's my best friend Jack begging me to make this documentary about his life.
Some people hate the way they sound, they hate the way they look.
No, it doesn't bother me.
Oh, by the way, he has a brain tumor.
Basically, the news that I got was that I was terminal, and one doctor told me I'd be dead in 6 months. They cut, from the center of the head, and they went up around here, and they went in front of the ear.
A big chunk of my brain is gone.
The tumor has injuries somewhat. You want the whole thing on tape?
Yeah, completely.
Why? That's insane.
We all die at some point. It has to deal with knowing it's going to happen and how you live your life and how you try to accept that death is going to get you.
Swedish restaurant.
East Kitchen and Catering.
Black News newspaper. The Black News came out on a monthly schedule pretty much. Wherever Black people were and we could receive information on their struggle and their sacrifices and their achievements, we covered it.
Out of Black News, which was the news magazine, there became a publishing company called East Publishers.
East Records. Imani Child Development Center.
We had a bookstore. The bookstore was called Akiba and Cool.
Mabazi Clothing Shop.
He's had a clothing store. where they would actually import or they would create their own clothing based upon latest styles within the African world.
Evening School of Knowledge.
Kanunawana Food Cooperative.
Then we had our food store. We opened up a store that provided both herbs and fresh vegetables.
East Jazz Club.
Uhuru Sasa Shule.
My buddy and I were exploring some caves one day. We found one that seemed totally undiscovered. It was a tight squeeze, especially for Jim.
How's it looking up ahead, Jim?
Can't tell.
But it opened up into an amazing little cavern.
I don't think anyone's been in here for a long time.
There was a lot of pottery in that cave.
Whoa, careful of that hole.
But the craziest thing we saw in there?
What's down there?
It seemed like he fell in that hole and broke his leg or something. Then couldn't get out and died there.
You know, I made some beta soup. It's like potato soup.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. I'll get the soup going then. Eat it up. Yeah. Why don't you get undressed in the meantime? Undressed. And if you put your clothes in the hole.
It's a bit cold here now.
Cold? Oh no, the heating on.
I'm an idiot. Hi. So let me welcome to the stage Armida Kiani, the director of Customs, Alan Cordell, the director of Lizard Laughed, Tayo Giwa, the director of The Sunrises in the East, Bradley Berman, the director of Jack Has a Plan, Kevin T. Morales, director of Generation Rex, and Anna Baumgarten, the director of Disfluency. And I'll get out of the way so some people can come this way as well. So I'm going to sit with you and not stand since my leg is a wreck. Well, first off, let me figure out what I'm doing. Let me thank all of you for coming all the way to Florida. Some of you very, very far, and then some of you just from New York's and the LAs of the world, and in between. It means a lot to us. Every year we do the Filmmaker Forum, and it's sort of the chance for us to put as many of you together as sort of like we can fit on the stage to talk a little bit, not just about your own movies, but the processes you've had, you know, in your careers, whether you're just starting out or whether you've made dozens of features or shorts or documentaries, and can sort of impart some knowledge to the people in the audience, and also let you all have a little bit of conversations about yourselves, war stories, you know, the fun stuff, the dirt. People are here for the dirt. They don't want to hear about how good your shoot went. Like, they want to hear about the lightning strikes and the police involvement, and, you know. But I guess maybe I'll have you starting, Anna, introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about your movie. All of these movies have played in the festival already, at least one time, except for Customs, which will be premiering this weekend. So yeah, we'll start here.
Oh, sure. So
you can pull. Yeah.
Okay. I was like, I don't know. So hi, my name is Anna Baumgarten, and I am the writer and director and one of the producers of Disfluency. It's a feature film, a coming-of-age story. It's kind of Perks of Being a Wallflower meets Coda in a lot of ways. So it's Jane fails her college class, doesn't graduate on time, and has to go home to her parents' house in Michigan on the lake for the summer. She, reconnects with family, friends, the community. She does a language study that helps her graduate, and then she comes to terms with the trauma she went through that caused her to fail. So that's a little about Disfluency. It started out as a short film, I'll say. So we'll get into it a little later.
Oh, is it my turn?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like, going on.
My name is Kevin Morales, and my film Generation Rex is a 90s teen comedy, and it was sort of inspired by a homework assignment I had in high school when I was a junior in high school in 1994, in which we had to read this crazy book called Generations, The History of America's Future, which is about generational theory. Some people know about it, very few people don't. But in this homework assignment, I had to write a paper about what would happen in the next crisis period in generational theory, which was going to happen around 2020. So in 1994, I wrote a paper about how the world would try to end in many ways in 2020. And then in 2017, it was like, wow, this is all really happening.
It's like the Nostradamus or Simpsons of
the
world.
And I had this kind of existential crisis. Anyway, the idea behind it was to kind of create like a John Hughes Breakfast Club kind of movie, but if we could do it without the like low-key racism and misogyny. And then also, the discussion of representation and who gets to tell what stories. So I recruited two 17-year-old girls to write the script because I wanted it to feel like authentically teen and not like my sentimental remembrance of being a teenager or my cynical, like you kind of have to go one way or the other. And these girls who also star in it wrote this really incredible, like heartfelt, like earnest movie sort of about like female friendship and being queer and that's it. That's where it comes from.
Nice. Brad.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bradley Berman. I'm the director of Jack Has a Plan. I consider myself an early career filmmaker in his late 50s. I graduated from film school, then got distracted for 30 years before I came back to it. So the film is essentially, sounds heavy, but it's like a dying man's request to me. It was my best friend who had this crazy story of being diagnosed in his early 30s with a terminal brain tumor and being given 6 months to live, but he lived for 25 years, always sort of on the precipice. So he had this perspective about life and death that I recognized that from the beginning of meeting him, and he became a close friend for 25 years before he, reached a point where he said, wow, I was given 25 extra years that I didn't expect, and things are kind of starting to slide. And it's, my time to go, and I'm going to take this matter into my own hands. And before things get really bad, I'm going to exercise it was weird. We started shooting in 2016. I didn't want to witness this, but he was persistent, and I started witnessing it and just shooting it very informally. And in the middle of that, California, I'm based in the Bay Area, passed End of Life Options Act, which gave him the right to decide how he was going to make his exit. And what else can I say? It was an incredible journey. It's a very personal documentary, and we'll get into it more later. But thanks for having me on the panel.
Of course.
Hey everyone, my name is Tayo. I'm the director of The Sun Rises in the East. It's a documentary on a organization founded in 1969 in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, called The East. It's a highly influential organization in my community in Brooklyn that many people don't know about. They are a contemporary of like the Black Panthers, the Young Lords. They rose out of the Black Power movement in the 70s, and in our community, their influence is still ongoing. And we came to this story. My wife and I run an Instagram account that chronicles Black-owned businesses in our neighborhood. And in doing, this Instagram account, we kept bumping into these stories about this organization called the East. And, when we tried to find out more about the East, there wasn't a ton of information about it, easily accessible. There was, some academic literature written about them that, a professor featured in our film wrote. But in terms of sort of chronicling this history, there wasn't a ton of information about it. And they bumped into a lot of sort of really significant historical moments. They arose out of this really big school strike in New York City when the community in which this organization was founded was given community control over a school district, and then the entire New York City school district the entire New York City teachers union went on strike for a couple months, and finally the teachers were hired back, and the leaders behind this community control experiment founded this organization that went on to create a private school. They had this world famous jazz club where some of the most famous jazz musicians in the world would come to play very cheaply in the neighborhood. And they founded a co-op. They had a farm in Guyana. They had this arts festival that celebrated its 50th anniversary last year. And so, just this extraordinary story that, people may have known about different aspects about it, but it was important to us that we tied these disparate threads together. And, it was funny, one of the panelists mentioned that their film started as a short. Ours started out as a short as well. This is my first feature film. We had made a short film the year prior, and, the idea was like, we're going to make another short film for our Instagram account. And when we started interviewing people, we realized we were documenting some really significant history, and the story was just way too big to be told in a short form. And so here we are, my wildest imagination to be at a film festival. I wasn't really setting out to do that, and here we are.
Nice. Great.
My name's Alan Cordell. I went to film school, and then after film school, I directed some music videos for a couple of friends that I went to school with whose careers were kind of taking off. I did a handful of music videos for bands like Beach House, Girl Talk, Dan Deacon. And then I worked for a company called Super Deluxe, where we made like really weird, irreverent videos for the internet. Like I made a video of a guy getting his eyebrows plucked out. Some of those got millions of views. It was really weird. And then I've always wanted to make narrative films. And then one day I was reading this comic anthology, and I ran across this comic by this guy named Noah Van Sciver. And his stuff really spoke to me, and I adapted one of his comics into The Lizard Laughed. Sorry, do you mind?
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I just need a second.
Hi, my name is Armida and Kenny, and I'm from Norway, and I have the short film Customs, and I studied film in the north of Norway, like a small art film school in a really small fishing village, which was amazing. And then I made a graduate film there that was like a comedy drama, and it really kind of made me discover more what kind of filmmaker I wanted to be. And then a few years later, there was like this sort of, because in Norway we have a lot of grants and a lot of support for filmmakers, and there was a program at the local film center that was supposed to help filmmakers that have stories that aren't represented that much on screen. And if you got in, you got a small budget and access to equipment, and you could get advice on your project. And then I got in. It was over a few months, and we met 4 times, and I already had a script ready, and that was this script for Customs. And Customs is about a backpacker from China who's visiting a small village in Norway, and he's used a sort of homestay app, sort of Be Welcome or Couchsurfing, but he hasn't read the profile properly of the host. So when he arrives at his home, he kind of meets something very unexpected. And at first he thinks it's just the man who's a naturist, But then he discovers that he also has rules that who's ever going to stay with them also needs to be naked.
What's the outcome? So I kind of have a sort of a specific question, I guess, a little bit for each of you, and then we'll let the audience have at you and as well. So I guess I will start with Anna, since you have spoken the least of the last down the line. And you mentioned it in your statement that this was a short film that became a feature, but your connection to the short film is very different to a degree than the feature. So if you could tell the audience maybe a little bit about that, but then also why you came to be the director of Disfluency.
Now I'm going to talk a lot.
That's good. That's good.
Talking
And I'm not going to talk at all.
As long as I don't have to talk, it's really fine.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for asking. That's a great question. So I'll tell you kind of my whole little journey with it. So I graduated from the University of Michigan in 2015, where I studied film. They have a film program. I focused in screenwriting, and I went to Los Angeles to pursue screenwriting. And I had this experience in college that I couldn't get off my chest. So I wrote about it. I never had an intention to make a short film originally. I just wrote the script. But then I felt more and more compelled to do it. And I had a background in producing from school, so I decided to write and produce it. And I brought on my friend Laura Holiday to direct, and she did an absolutely beautiful job. I also didn't feel like I was ready with the content because, and I pretty firmly believe that you should write scars, not wounds. So, and it was very much still a wound for me, so I didn't feel prepared, and I also was a little, I still am insecure about being a director. There's a lot of imposter syndrome there. But anyways, so me and Laura made this film together, and we, went around the festival circuit. We played at a lot of great places, and we were just submitting to labs and all kinds of things. Anywhere we could get the movie seen, anywhere we could get resources for whatever else, because we were both, young aspiring filmmakers. And we got into this program called the Short to Feature Lab, which if you're a short filmmaker, write that down. And you want to make your short a feature. And it's run by Jim Cummings and Ben Wiesner, Vanishing Angle, who, would you mind sharing what films they've had at this festival?
Oh my God, I don't know if I can remember all. So Jim's first film with us was Thunder Road, the short version of the film, where he stars as the police officer in a single take shot. And then over the years, Jim has been just really phenomenal about submitting stuff with his partners, Matt and Natalie. This year, Dress a Cow is also theirs, that Don Luby directed, which is in the documentary shorts program. It's so many, it's really hard to
That's fair, yeah.
But he's also been a champion incredibly. So once Jim called me and asked me if I knew this 17-year-old high school student in Tampa Bay, Florida, and I said, no, because that's over there. And he's like, well, I've seen his movie, and I'll pay his entry fee to submit to the Florida Film Festival. And I said, I'm not going to charge his entry fee, just get him to send me the movie. And that film actually got in the film festival that year in competition. It was phenomenal. So Jim's I don't know how you describe him. He's like a saint.
Jim is a huge, we have, at the Short Feature Lab, we kept saying, this isn't a cult. We swear
yeah, it's kind of a cult, though.
And when I say cult, I mean the cult of filmmaking in general. I'm not saying, his philosophy is just help people and help people get their stuff made. And they were like a godsend to me, primarily because they just believed in me more than I believed in myself at the time. But anyways, so we submitted to this lab and we got into it, and I spent 5 days in Malibu with other filmmakers talking about, transitioning their short to a feature in every way possible. So creatively, financially, how do you distribute an indie film, all of this. And they said, we're not just here for this week with you. We're here to help you make your film and be your mentors, which they really, they really, really did. They're the executive producers on my film. They really helped guide me, and anytime I had questions, they were there to answer. And so after I did the lab, when I was at the lab, I started writing the script. And I because the content was so heavy and the short is a little more like the tone is serious. The feature has a little more like summer fun, coming of age in it. And I was like, if I'm going to make this film for several years, I need it to be bearable for me. So I decided to do that. So I started developing it at the lab. And then I just want to share a few things real quick. Am I still?
You're good.
Is my talking?
You got
Okay,
90
good,
minutes.
Great. As long as I'm.
Whenever they start just yelling at you or glaring, then you'll know you've gone too long.
Perfect. So a few things kind of happened simultaneously. So the short to feature lab, and then we were in this competition on Seed and Spark, which if you're not familiar with Seed and Spark, it's just like Kickstarter, but specifically for film. So we were in this competition on Seed and Spark called Hometown Heroes, which is run by the Duplass brothers. And I thought, could I write this for my hometown in Michigan? Yes, absolutely, I can do that. And then I've got my location set. So I had the setting, I had the short to feature lab backing me up, and I also had the relationships with our two lead actresses, Libe and Ariella Barrere, who are sisters and also play sisters in the movie. So I had those three components that I went forward with. And while we didn't win the Hometown Heroes competition, we were a runner-up. But a part of that process was the Duplass Brothers company was like, hey, this is great. We would love to read the first 20 pages of your script. And I said, I was at a film festival at the time, and I said, okay, great. And can I get them to you tonight? And I wrote the first 20 pages in in 8 hours. And then the next day I was like, glad I did that. That was so hard. And the next day they were like, these are great. Can we see the whole script? And
Give me the weekend.
Yeah. And I said, yeah, you can see the whole script.
This is like a filmmaking 101 is that you always say yes.
Yes. So I was like, can you give me a few days? I'm traveling. So in 48 hours, I wrote the first 85-page draft of the script. I sent it to a few friends who were like, this is legible. This is weirdly good for 2 days. Sure, send it.
They all low-key hate you.
Yes, I know. So it got me to write the first draft. And then through Jim's support and Laura Holliday, my good friend and the director of the short, and Danny Mooney, my producer, they really pushed me to direct and gave me the confidence. And I'm so glad that I did. So that was,
it's an incredible journey. You dropped a couple of pieces of knowledge in there that maybe I just want to get a chance to talk to the audience. And obviously, we're live streaming this on Facebook right now, so filmmakers that are watching this, there's some important pieces of information there. The Seed and Spark and the Hometown Heroes thing, 2 years ago, Drought, that premiered here at the film festival, went through that same program. They did win Hometown Heroes, so Mark and Jay provided X amount of dollars towards the budget. And of course, their history with the festival goes back 20 years when they won the grand jury award for Scrapple when nobody knew who they were at all, and have been back several times before and have a film this year, again, that they produced as of yet. So you'll hear things like Project Involved or Independent or Seed and Spark, and these are things that you really need to make notes on because you kind of liken Seed and Spark to Kickstarter, but Seed and Spark has such a extremely high reputation in the industry for what gets put on there compared to sort of saying I can Kickstarter my whole life.
Yeah, it's very community based and they really work with you to build the profile. They don't just go great, you can raise money now. They really give you notes and
Kevin, so you already touched on this a little bit, but what I kind of want to know, there's two kind of things that I really want to talk about in the film. And I know everyone wants to talk to you about the soundtrack, so I'll definitely have you ask a little bit about the soundtrack because it's literally back when they used to do, well, now they make vinyl again, but it's like a 12-volume vinyl set from K-Tel Records or something. You'd have to put it out as a box set of all the crap you got on this movie. But actually working with Tori and Bridget on the script, when I watched the movie again, and I just watched it again for the second time just the other day, I think I'm struck by we all interact in today's world, right, where we're technology just inundated. So I was 19 in 1994. And I can't remember how I interacted, even though I still talk to lots of friends in high school, I can't remember how I interacted with them. I don't think that I could mentally go back and do this. So I understand the desire that you had to kind of bring in two teenagers to write the script, but I'm curious as to how you got their mindset back to an era that they weren't even a thought process of like in your life, and make it feel authentic. It feels like the 90s. Like I'm looking for like anachronisms. I don't know how to say that word. Anachronisms. Thank you. So that's some jumbled mess I just threw at you.
Sure. I think the leap of faith I made was, even though these girls were born in 2001 and have literally no attachment to the 20th century,
yeah,
that them just writing about teenagers, that's sort of a common experience.
Yeah, it's universal.
Yeah, being
it's
17
shitty
is
when you were
being
17 then, it's shitty when you're 17 now. Yeah.
Well, and it's a time in your life where you're supposed to be thinking about the future. Like, you're supposed to be planning about the future. You're on the edge of being an adult, and we did a lot of exercises. We watched films that sort of have like that generational voice.
Yeah.
Like, we watched American Graffiti. We watched The Big Chill. Yeah. Which, if you haven't watched The Big Chill in a long time, like, baby boomers, man.
Yeah.
Like, that movie just like it sets that, like, it really sets like that generation, right? And
I mean, they talk about Big Chill as essentially sort of being the definitive.
well, it's like, I don't know, if you haven't seen it, or you don't remember. Yeah, it's these baby boomers who are now in their 30s, and they're yuppies now.
Yeah.
And they're like, man, we used to really care about stuff, and now we don't. Why is that? And now, if there's any baby boomers in the audience, I apologize. But, like, that attitude has gotten even worse now. No, I'm just like, right. It's a gross generalization.
It's a general.
Yeah. Sure.
They're going to throw down in the audience.
No, I get it.
Chairs are coming.
So the idea was to sort of be like, well, can Generation X has behaved broadly in sort of a very, not in a similar way, but in its own way. Can you look at that mentality forming that sort of like, it's all gonna burn, I don't know what to tell you mentality that Generation X has, like a slacker generation, right? Like, that's what we're always told.
It's what's weird about, I guess, being Generation X. This is like, we don't really need to go into this. This is like therapy. Is that we actually had to watch we got all of our movies in real time.
Yeah.
Like, essentially the rise of American independent cinema, through Linkletter and whatnot, that was all happening in real time. And Hughes and you mentioned John Hughes, which also was as well. And so, and of course, we crossed both of those boundaries from John Hughes movies when we're 10 or 11 years old to, Richard Linklater movies when we're, 20. So, and I'm not sure that a whole lot of other generations did that, because when you talk about The Big Chill, you talk about American Graffiti, you're talking about movies that are set essentially 10 to 20 years after the experience of those events that are told later. And so it used to be this idea that you could only tell a generational movie a decade or two after it was over, when you had perspective on it, which was the kids who lived it, then went and told their story about it.
Well, and I guess, when you look at American Graffiti, even though that was actually only 10 years.
Yeah, it's 10 years,
happened,
62 to 70.
Lucas and sort of everyone clearly was like, wow, man, life was different before Vietnam, right? Like, I mean, there's a sentimentality to it
It's a loss of innocence movie. Exactly. That's how the ending,
So I tried so hard to not make a movie that was sentimental or cynical. And the only way I could do that was with two brains that were not participating in that time. Yeah. And one of the things that the girls did, or that we did together, is we created these surveys and we sent them to Gen Xers. And they just had these questions like, what did you do after school? What did you spend your extra money on? Like, what did you care about politics? Like, all these things. And they were really fascinated to see where answers lined up for 17-year-olds, but then where the differences were.
Yeah.
Like, everyone in my daughter's age in high school knew who the Secretary of Education was, because she was a fascist.
I don't even remember that.
Right, but when we were in high school in the 90s, no one knew who the Secretary of Education was.
Yeah.
And we didn't care.
Well, so we're in Orlando, so it was Betsy DeVos, so she's from... We hate her.
Sure, right.
Because her name's on, like, buildings.
Right, but, like, I didn't... I remember being 18...
This is being live streamed out.
Yeah,
Screw you, Betsy DeVos.
Well, Betsy. So the idea was I could sit there and say, like, okay, but we wouldn't have said it that way.
Yeah.
But like the thing, the things that characters care about
Yeah.
are kind of universal.
Absolutely.
I gave them a premise, you know, like these kids go away for a long weekend. This has happened and this has happened. And we talked about what the two main characters want and the tactics they take to get what they want. And that's where the conflict comes out of. And then I'm a big believer in sort of conflict action reverse, you know, like Aristotle kind of nailed it 2,500 years ago. Like that's the best kind of storytelling. So, you know, what is the ending of this movie? And now how can we make that feel surprising yet inevitable?
Sure.
You know? And so I think it was definitely a sort of like a crash course for them. And there
It's
was a lot of-
beautifully done.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
he does an amazing job of it. Bradley, this is a really interesting question because there's a thought process in documentary filmmaking where you do not necessarily insert yourself into the story as a documentarian. I mean, there's always an overriding feeling that, you know, you can't objectively observe anything because your observation of it alone changes. But you can't tell this movie in any other way because you need to be the voice on the other side of the camera because the amount of the movie that is so specifically just almost a diary concept. So I want to discuss that, but I also, you know, without getting too heavy, you know, ask you how you could sort of agree to go on a sort of inevitable journey, like from a psychological standpoint. Like, how did you prepare yourself for this?
Basically, I didn't prepare for it. It was just, you know, when my friend, my very close friend was going through this intense thing, he invited me to be with him.
Yeah.
And we get so busy in our lives. You know, my full-time work is as a writer, not as a filmmaker, and it's not related to the subject matter at all. So that this was a kind of an excuse and a permission to hang out with this guy who I knew wasn't going to be around. So we didn't have a script. We didn't have plans. I would sneak away and hang out and turn on the camera and see what happened. There was another part of that. Oh, by inserting myself into it. I did not want to be in it. I didn't plan to be in it. And fortunately, when I reached out to Chris Metzler, who's the producer, and we started to recruit an editor, Quinn Costello, they, you know, read me the riot act. You know, they, listen, you have to be in this.
Yeah.
And so I agree. I at least had the sense enough to say, okay, let me try this. It's not something I feel comfortable with naturally to be on camera, but it just made, you know, of course, I needed to be in the film.
I think it allows the movie to stop being specifically a documentary about an individual with an extraordinarily unexpected journey in life who has decided to take this final step, and sort of becomes something more about, like, not necessarily explaining the logic behind it, but allowing it to sort of be like two friends who you're sneak peeking in on what you would talk about if the camera wasn't there.
Exactly. I mean, I started to see it as a buddy film.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's just two guys hanging out, and very much took an approach of making it feel like that, with a lot of FaceTime conversations, with shooting on the phone as much as possible. I mean, when something intense is happening, I mean, it would be a very different film if there was a crew.
Yeah.
Right? So I just wanted, like maybe Tuesdays with Maury or something like that, I just wanted it to feel natural, feel like you were just in there hanging out with us.
Yeah, and that may be one of those kinds of things where we talk about this idea of how observational can a documentary be if there is like a sound guy and an audio girl and, you know, like this and, you know, whatever all going on, and then you're just talking. But you did shoot significant portions, especially near the end of the film, just on a phone.
Right. So. Yeah, I mean, it was intense,
yeah.
Right? And I just didn't want to be encumbered myself with too much gear.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I regretted it because I mean, the projection here was great, and the audio was clear, but it would have been nice to have him boomed like right over and have absolutely crystal audio. But it was a sacrifice I made.
Yeah.
I wanted to just be in the experience.
I'll tell you that personally, and then we can move on. Next question is that it doesn't need that. It doesn't need to be crystal clear, and that audio doesn't need to be there because it's real. So.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of, Maisels Brothers and other, Portapack stuff, and just.
Yeah, and Agnes Varda docs for me. She's just running around the street with, a little nothing camera. So.
Exactly, and what's incredible is the quality you can get with a phone.
Yeah.
I mean, I was literally with just an iPhone 8 in scenes, and at the Regal, it was on the silver screen giant, and it was fine, right? So I mean, to filmmakers, young filmmakers out there, I think, take that to heart that you can do a lot without being encumbered by too much big budget equipment.
Absolutely, absolutely. Taya, I'm just, look, we're in the arts, so we're into art and we're into culture, and Orlando's got a really interesting history in the Paramore area, in Eatonville, which is just blocks from here, by my house in Bookertown, which is this tiny little just a neighborhood that was sort of this kind of very early African American communities, but the East is so crazy to me because the idea behind it is that it was all these young kids, and it was sort of like, not only can you not tell us what to do, and we're going to do it anyway, it was that we didn't even necessarily know what we were doing, and we did it, and the legacy is massive. When you look at the end of Sunrise in the East, the amount of the splintering is crazy, and even at your Q&A, just the other night, people were here in the audience that were founding members of the East that talked about taking that to Puerto Rico, to other countries all around. And when you all sat down to try to figure it out, I guess I want to know, how did you get from where you started to the East? And then when you got to the East, how did you follow it everywhere else it went? I know that's broad, but it's just I can't imagine the amount of effort it took.
Yeah, I mean, I think our saving grace and sort of putting our arms around this huge story was that we sort of came to this story more simply because we were chronicling history and culture in our community through the lens of Black businesses. And so when we started hearing about the East, our sort of framing was really about the legacy. One of the most fascinating things about the East is that, so there's a founding generation. These are sort of high school students and young teachers in the late 60s and 70s who started this organization. But many of them had children who went to this private school that they created. These children are now in their 50s, and they're all sort of prominent community members and people, building and doing things. And so, there was an idea that we could tell a story about, this organization, the people who founded it, but we thought it was fascinating to sort of tie that legacy to the children who are now sort of speaking this story to the community. And so it was really about sort of how the organization was founded, and then also speaking to the people who are sort of the children of this movement, how they've taken these lessons and sort of continue to build within, Brooklyn, but also elsewhere.
Yeah.
The folks who came to our initial screening and talked about, frequenting the jazz scene at the East, that's literally happened at every screening that we've done. It's just it's a community that is strong, and that impact, it's hard to even describe to people what the East did because it was just so multifaceted. They created a lot of stuff, but what they did was they impacted sort of the psychological sort of understanding Black people in our community had about themselves and in sort of the culture. And so it's that sort of psychological underpinning that has this effect that people still speak its praises, because it was that gave them this sense of identity that they still hold on to. The children who went to the school have this strong sense of identity, this confidence in self, this pride in their culture. And so that's why people are so passionate about it. You speak to people from the East and it's whoa.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. It fosters this sense of community, but it fosters a sense of community in a really unique place in American history, which is it's coming out of the civil rights movement and it's coming into this sort of Black is Beautiful 1970s Black Power movement, and gives them a place.
Yeah, and then that's another key point is that they had a place. So the East was initially founded in this small building that they bought for like $20,000 in the late 60s that it's in Bedford-Stuyvesant, and it was like a former sort of like carriage barn. And they refurbished it and then they turned it into this, jazz scene that had literally, the most famous jazz musicians coming to play there every weekend. And it's the sense that they had this place and then they owned it, and that sort of gave this identity. From there, they moved on to, operate out of this armory. So I don't know how much you all know about Brooklyn, but Brooklyn has a series of armories that were built by the state, around the Civil War era.
Yeah, it's like Civil War.
And they're enormous. And this particular armory that was built that the East occupied, it's like a city block wide like castle. And you see this thing, you're like, whoa, this is a castle in the middle of the city. And they occupied it. And so they became like this like center point in the Black Power movement. And what we were astonished by was that they were so integrally tied to all these organizations that people are familiar with. Everyone knows sort of like the Black Panthers, and they have this idea in the head about who these people are. But the East was just as prominent in that movement, but they were different. They were part of this like cultural arts movement. They had their own thing, but they were still part of this sort of collective, and they were like this meeting point. And they had a place. So like they had this armory where people from in sort of the Black liberation movement throughout the world were coming to Brooklyn, to the East, to sort of meet. And, there were disputes within, this movement. Some people, refer to them as cultural nationalists. Other people were more, with a socialist perspective. And the East was a little more agnostic in terms of, they had a point of view, but they were sort of like welcomed everyone into this building and were like a place where people could exchange ideas. And so they're tied to all these sort of really historical, significant movements. From our, vantage, we're like, it's sad that this is a story that's not as well known. People don't know who the East is.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing is like, I've been in New York a bunch of times for a hot minute. I lived in like way the hell up in near Washington Heights. And I've never heard of the East. And I got friends that live all over Brooklyn, including people that are in Bed-Stuy, that did not really I've never heard about it. Like they probably know about it, but they've never just like gone out and been like, you ever heard of this thing? So when this movie came to us, we were just like, I don't know anything about this. And that's an amazing thing about documentaries and why people need to see these movies and understand that these stories exist. So I appreciate all the props in the world for bringing this out,
Yeah, thank you. I mean, and just in terms of the process, everything in the movie just existed. It was all there. I mean, one of the founding leaders of this organization, G2AUC, a lot of the archival footage that we used in his interview was actually filmed as part of the Eyes of the Prize documentary.
Yeah, and you mentioned that in the thing, and I'm just amazed to know that there's still archival interviews that never got an Eyes of the Prize that are out there.
And it was incredible. This was part of the larger civil rights story in America. He went on in the interview to talk about the founding of this organization, but it wasn't sort of central to the sort of Eyes on the Prize U.S. civil rights story, but he was a figure in that movement. And so when we sort of found that it was just digitized and they were so happy that someone was interested in it, it was like that, and even sort of the archival sort of images that we had. I mean, when we came to the founders and the people who had these records, they were just like, here, have this, please. Thank you for caring enough to tell this story. Nothing was just, created by us as we were making it. It was more about sort of marshaling this material to tell a cohesive story.
For sure.
One other thing.
Yeah.
I know I'm rambling.
No, you're good.
I'm sorry. So this idea that, there are stories that haven't been told, but sometimes it's like the framing of the stories have been told incorrectly.
Yeah.
So I mentioned this idea that there's a school strike when this this community was given control of their the curriculum in their school, and they tried to remove teachers and assign them to other schools. And this was heavily covered in the press. Like, this was like a really big story. The entire New York City teachers union went on strike. But the way it was described in the media was that these teachers were radicals. The community had this radical agenda.
Yeah.
And really what they were asking for, if you look at it from sort of today's perspective, it's actually the reverse of what you see in today's politics, where it's really more conservative communities who want control over their curriculum, not sort of Black. Like, this was like a 95% Black community, right? And what they were asking for doesn't seem that big to want to have control over their curriculum, the types of things that their kids are learning. And so when we were making this story, we're like going through these archival records, and it was like, we were looking at some of these like, archival images, and sort of the captions were like, radical teachers are doing XYZ.
It's like reading today's newspaper, really.
Yeah, and it was really about like just sort of reframing this narrative to sort of tell it more fairly, because from the community perspective, these were heroes, and no one ever told it from the perspective of the community, and the story's really been buried. And so it was like, we just felt this responsibility to tell it in a way that our community could feel pride about, because there's an extraordinary history here, but no one talks about it. No one says their name. People are like, ooh, there was some conflicts there. It's very Black. I don't know. I don't want to talk about it. And it's like, no, this is a beautiful history about self-determination in our community and people creating for themselves. And so,
absolutely. Well, I mean, Alan, this is one of the most unique, I think, narrative shorts that we watched this year. I'm just kind of like really excited about getting you onto this panel about it, because it's a very interesting father-son relationship story. And you said it was based on a comic book, which I was not aware of, which I think is really interesting as well. So, I'd like to know what struck you about the story and why you wanted to tell it. I also want to talk about the idea of casting Sky Elabar as this sort of man in the middle of this desert, because when we think of Sky Elabar, and we've seen him in a lot of movies over the years. Well, I mean, a lot of movies, but when he shows up in a movie, you don't cast him, in my opinion, to play every man. He almost seems of another, like, race or another planet.
Right.
And you've given him a really unique character here. So a little bit about that, kind of both of those things.
So yeah, like I was saying, I discovered Noah's stuff in this magazine called Now. And so I bought a book of his called Disquiet, which is a compilation of some of his shorter comics. And the first story in there was The Lizard Laughed. And as soon as I was done reading it, I was like, this needs to be a film, because it just read like a short film.
Yeah.
So I reached out to him. I found his contact information. I reached out to him. I told him I was interested in optioning the story, even though I didn't know what that really meant. I'd never optioned anything before. And then I went on Google and figured out how to option something. I found a blank contract.
Like a little mini contract.
It. And he was hesitant at first because the story is about his own father.
Okay.
But I connected to the story because I have a complicated relationship with my own parents, and it felt like a universal thing, like everyone has parents, and a lot of people have weird relationships with their parents. And so it just felt like I wanted to dip my toes into making a film that wasn't challenging, but present it in a beautiful way.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And then I had seen Sky Elabar obviously in The Greasy Strangler. And then I saw him in something else more recently where he looked exactly like what I pictured Harvey to look like.
Yeah.
The father. And I was like, oh, he would be perfect just based on his look. So didn't know how to get in touch with him. I found him on Twitter, and I followed him on Twitter, and like within seconds, he followed me back. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna DM him right now.
Quick while it's hot.
Yeah, so I DM'd him, and I was like, hey, I want to make this short film, The Lizard Left. I think you'd be great for the dad. He said, send it to me. So I sent it to him right then. 15 minutes later, he was like, let's do this. I was like, all right. Felt like I got incredibly lucky.
I feel like that there is a beauty to the age of social media where like you can actually do that. We have someone who's worked at the festival for years and years and years, who was a screenwriter in the 1970s in Los Angeles, and he always used to talk about like, well, I just walked over to Raquel Welch's house with the screenplay in my hand and knocked on her front door. Like they'd shoot you like today if you walk to anybody's house like with the screen, you know, if you could get past the gate. So that's sort of, we've reached this new like, well, you actually can like randomly find people depending on how semi-active they are on their own social media sites. So
yeah.
I love that about him. He obviously seems really approachable, and I've seen him do some really unique roles. But this is so serious and understated for him, and he's perfect for it.
Yeah, he's a really good actor, and I think he wanted to sort of also like, you know, like I'm known for making these music videos and weird videos, so I wanted to do something that was understated, and I think maybe he felt the same way.
Yeah, I think that's something too for people that are out there that are watching it as filmmakers, is that I've heard many times over the years that filmmakers have a lot more success approaching even a larger named actor if you're offering them something that they've really never done before. So if you, I only make comedies, you know, as an actor, and you give them a seriously dramatic role that you think that they could kill it in, that actually tends to them go like, oh, well, you're not making The Greasy Strangler 3. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's really cool. And I love that story that he literally within 15 minutes was like, nailed it, let's do it. Armida, so there's no spoiler. You've kind of given the breakdown of it, but this is also going to be a casting question, which is sort of like pre-prepped you for, because I feel like, and then I want to talk about the grant processing, because that's something that's super unique to everywhere else. It's not unique. It's ununique, except for in America, where no one will give you grant money to do anything from a government perspective. So I want to know a little bit about approaching your cast. And telling them that you're going to be naked for the whole movie, and you're going to shoot in longer shots, so it's not all just above the waist shots. And then, yeah, for people that don't know, throughout Europe and all of this, there's incredible amounts of lottery funds. There's government funding that are putting all of this money behind movies, and here, you know, it's not like that at all. So I'd like to know a little bit about the support systems that you see inside of like Norway, from the Norwegian film industry and Swedish film industries and things like that. You always see stuck on everybody's movies that come over from Europe. So again, like a lot of information I just threw at you.
Yeah, no problem. So for the casting, it was different for each of the actors, because there's actually 3 actors in the film. So for the first, for the backpacker character, because when I do castings, I do really like long auditions, because I work with non-actors and actors, and I want people to truly kind of have space to show their potential, and sometimes that can be hard to do if you just have to like walk up and say a line. So for him, I was just looking anywhere for people that had that could seem like they're from a non-Norwegian country, sort of. And I also kind of wanted someone that was a person of color, because there is a lack of representation in that. I had these like flyers in my backpack for auditions, and I was giving them out as often as I sort of could. And then I was out with some friends, with some art friends, just getting drinks, and they had some people from their class with them. And I spotted the actor, and I was like, okay, he could be interesting. And then he had already left at that point, so I gave like flyers to other people, and then someone gave it to him. And then he contacted me and said, this sounds fun. And he had never acted before. It was like this first time in front of a camera.
I mean, everyone in your film is very naturalistic. Like, I believe that they are the characters. And he has an incredible deer in the headlights, look about him as it's all just happening around.
Yeah, he was really great and easy to work with. And with him, I think I would tell them beforehand on the phone. And when I was writing on like Facebook and casting groups, like I would write, at least for the male characters, I would write like someone that's comfortable with their body. And then if they were interested, I was like, okay, they look kind of right. I would tell them on the phone before. And then the guy that plays the naturist, he's actually a naturist in real life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's
So
easier to
very
get.
helpful, yeah. And also helped me kind of get more of sort of that perspective in it as well.
Yeah.
So he had done some extra work in some like amateur theater and stuff. And like a friend had almost used him for a music video. And then there's a woman in the film that you don't see here. She was the scenographer's mom.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds awkward. That actually seems more awkward,
Yeah, I know.
to be completely honest.
But she was also really great. She hadn't done much acting either.
Yeah.
So it was just very random how I found.
Yeah. I love her. I mean, she's kind of my favorite part of the movie because she's sort of the foil to it all. But it's hard not to just talk all about the movie that none of you have seen. So like really, but maybe just talk a little bit about the kind of arts support that you see from film institutes and from the government in Norway. And then maybe we can use that to try to figure out how to get our government to care about people and the arts.
Yeah, so...
It's like it's a small mountain we're going to climb.
Yeah. So it's we have different places you can get grants. So we have the Norwegian Film Institute, which is really great, and they're like more of the big boy, and then or the big girl, and then we have like local film centers around the country. So we have like the Mid Norwegian Film Center, and then we have the northern one, and then we have like Viken, which is sort of like the area around Oslo and like a bit bigger than that. And they all have like different kinds of grants you can apply for, and they have like different deadlines for those grants. And there's also, I think like some of them are, I'm trying to remember if it's changed or not, because there's like one type of grant where you can apply where you don't have a script and you're sort of just want to develop an idea.
Like a development grant, yeah.
Yeah, and then there's other kinds of grants where you just want to sort of explore an idea and see if you want to make a film, and you can get a grant for that. And most of the grants you need a producer, I would say. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And for the one that I was at, it was just kind of, the budget just came with it. It was like $4,000-ish dollars, yeah.
Okay.
That they just gave, sort of. And then I had to report back what I spent the money on.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. I mean, and they're similar. When you get a grants here and things like that, you do have to evidence that you didn't like go out and buy beer with it and like,
exactly.
have a party at your house. So.
But yeah, it's really.
You can, if you film the party, you're okay.
Yeah. But yeah, it's really amazing. But obviously, there's still like competition to
Sure.
get the grants. But it's just amazing that those opportunities even exist in the first place.
That's wonderful, and we love the movie. Okay, so there's probably about a half an hour left of the Q&A time here, and I would love to open up this to the audience. And so just raise your hand. Yeah, hi. I'll repeat just in case, because this room echoes that way. Kevin, how did you find these teenage girls to write the script?
So one of them is my daughter. And she's just grown up backstage at Broadway theaters and on sets, and she passionately cares about acting. I didn't push her into it. I didn't need a child actor in my life to justify my existence or anything like that. And she's quite good at it, and she's been in Spielberg films and Soderbergh stuff, and her and her co-star, who we got to write it, played sisters on an episode of Law & Order. So I actually just approached my daughter about writing it, and then she was like, could I do it with a friend? And I was like, sure. Yes.
I think the
If
dynamic.
that's what you need, like, go for it.
Yeah, the dynamic of that is really good too because it's a multi-voice movie, so being able to bounce that back and forth, I think, really helps.
And then as far as the rest of the teenagers in the film, my daughter went to professional performing arts in Midtown, from 6th to 12th grade, and most of those kids are her classmates, and they've been on TV and they've been on Broadway, and like they just had a chemistry that was so fantastic for us. I didn't have to like manufacture like you guys are really comfortable. Like if they just like they would just shove each other and like act like high school students who had like a common history. So that was that was sort of part of we could make a movie, like let's use your friends. Let's do, like use what you have and do what Hollywood sometimes fails at doing, which is like, it's about high schoolers. They all look about 28, so...
Yeah, that's one thing for sure about the movie. And also, it really hits this kind of dynamic age range because the characters in the film are essentially somewhere in like the 15 to 17 area. And there are some wild variations in what you look like between just those 2 years alone. So there's some people in there like the Heather Matarazzo's character's daughter, who they sort of bring out, which you see in the clip. She kind of looks like 13 years old. Like she's definitely like what are you doing with this little child? And where some of them like Bridget, so, have a little more maturity carried with them as well.
And they all except one, they were all 17 essentially. So.
Right here in the center, and then I'll come back to you. Behind. Okay, well, you go, and then we'll go you do. Hi, you go.
Okay. So it sounded like all these movies started out with you all had ideas and you started pursuing your ideas and did it with your own funds. Did there come a time when you needed more money to complete it or edit it or whatever, and then how did you get the support for that?
I'll let each of you kind of maybe give a elevator answer.
I did not use my own funds per se. I mean, I didn't make my movie with my own money. I had angel investors and people come on board. I will say the short film I did. So we ran a Kickstarter for the short film, and then I also supplemented like the rest of the money, which was quite a bit of money for me at the time. I was post graduating and all of that. When it came to making the feature film, it was, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but how funding kind of came for us was, it was very weird, kind of like my friend's like brother or whatever it was really just getting the word out as widely as possible and finding people that connected with what we were making. So those were the two things. And I will also say we didn't have like every last penny when we started shooting. So it was a continual process all the way through to keep raising money to get to the next step, because filmmaking is a moving train. And if you have a moving train, people are going to want to get on it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to start pushing the train. You don't wait until it's entirely all loaded up and you've got everything to go. You just make it happen.
People that are giving you money at the outset aren't necessarily want to do that when you haven't shot a single frame, but getting finishing funds tends to be a little bit more viable because you already essentially have a movie, and then you're like, well, now I need to color correct it and pay an editor and clean the sound up and things like this. So you'll see, especially Kickstarters, a lot of times for finishing funds, because they can already evidence that they made it, so the odds of your money not being vanishing into the oblivion are significantly higher.
God, I could really talk at length about this. And it's so awesome to hear the Norwegian, like, the government cares about us point of view. Because what I basically have to do is find people who like to gamble. And you go to them, and the first funds in our film was the girls and the kids did a Seed and Spark and raised $17,000. So at least we could start with, we have this % of the budget. And now we're looking for people to invest, and you have to basically create a business plan. And one of the reasons we made this kind of film was because the market sort of has
exists.
There's like a amount of money kind of on the table for a film like this, and if you can really make it for less than that, then you stand a chance at like at least getting everyone their money back. So then it was just a matter of, and this is sort of why I like being a filmmaker in New York City, because you meet people who aren't in Hollywood. You can find Wall Street people, you can find bond traders, you can find people, and you can be like, hey, like, we're making this movie, it's like this, and you know, they immediately go like, will it be on Netflix? And you're like,
You find hedge fund guys who
Yeah.
are dropping your budget on a bottle of wine.
right, yeah, exactly. Like, if they want to buy it, and they'd be like, oh, well, why would they want to buy it? And you're like, oh, well, we got Heather Matarazzo, and like, these kids
Yeah.
are really talented, and it's like a John Hughes film, and for this amount of money, you would have this many points in
Yeah.
it. And then to them, it sounds like a good idea, even though you very much tell them, this is a terrible idea. by
Yeah,
the
yeah,
way.
you're not getting any money on your points.
Yeah.
So, like-
And you're like, you're probably going to lose their money. And they're like, yeah, you're saying that, but I think now you're trying to like, don't tell me what to
It's
do.
like
Don't
reverse
tell me-
psychology.
Yeah, it is like reverse psychology. It's the weirdest thing. And it's like the train, like you're like, the movie's already getting made, you know, and like Oak, who plays Brandon, it's like, he was in Hamilton. He's like the original
Yeah.
Hercules Mulligan. And people are like, I love Hamilton. You're like, yeah, lots of people love Hamilton. He has 100,000 followers on Instagram. Like, you just kind of try and create all the reasons why it should work.
Yeah.
You know, often it doesn't.
Bradley and Tayo, like, I think it's actually a unique question to come to you two because documentaries tend to not go through similar processes and also tend to last for years. Like, we're not like we're making the movie and, you know, 18 months later we've made a movie. It's I'm making a documentary and 9 years later we're making a documentary. So I'll let you two kind of piggyback on each other maybe a little bit about that.
I'll be brief. I mean, the production, the principal photography, if you will, was took place over a couple of years, and the budget was zero.
Yeah, zero.
Okay, so it was only after we had this sort of tranche of material, and you know the story was fully done, that I started sort of feeding into the documentary industry through the producer Chris Metzler. And then it's almost like an industry into itself in terms of the kinds of foundations that support these things. And we applied to, you know, a dozen or more foundations and other supporters, and we got 1 out of 12. And that was just enough to trickle it along. And honestly, it hasn't stopped, even though we're premiering here.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we could definitely use a whole new sound mix and color. Like, we did it just scrappy.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of the same question because I mean, Brad touched on it too, because there is a little more grant money available when you're working on docs too.
There is, and I just want to reiterate, I mean, like, we didn't have a background in filmmaking. We had made a short the year before, but, you know, really out of ignorance, we just believed in ourselves and we're like, we're going to do this thing. And, you know, I had a full-time job. I you know, my wife was working full-time, and, you know, we're just like, all right, we'll just pay for this ourselves. And, you know, and people would always tell us, you know, like, documentaries take a long time to make. And, you know, with our film, I think it was pretty unique because it was like everything sort of already existed, and it was really more about, you know, getting permission to use it and putting it together. And so we actually started, you know, principal photography in, I want to say, January 2021, and we finished it by November 2021, which everyone's like, that's insane.
Yeah, it should be the fastest documentary production ever.
And like that year, I mean, we were just like, needing sleep. We were just like, you know, messianically just like, we got to do this. And I think that sort of like, we have to get this done, we don't have unlimited funds, was part of how we made it affordable for us. So I don't really have the answer to how to afford to make movies, and I'm sorry if it's unsatisfying.
So yeah, after Sky agreed to be in my film, it took me another 3 years to save up the money I needed.
Oh,
to actually
wow.
make it
I had
happen.
no idea. That's crazy.
I was gonna do like a crowdfunding campaign like a couple of times within that 3 years, but it just seemed like so much work, and I was like, I think I can save enough money.
So you fully financed this yourself?
I fully financed like
At least principal photography
Yeah,
and-
principal photography, and then I have these 2 animated sequences in the film.
Yeah.
And I needed a little help with that, so I actually have family help with that. So.
Awesome. On Armida, we know essentially, but you know, by all means.
So yeah, I used the budget that I got, and everyone in the crew worked for free. They were like my friends from film school, and then the actors got paid, and then the sound mixer got paid as well. But the only kind of thing where I ended up spending my own money was like sending it to festivals.
Yeah. Yeah, some things to think about in there is that, you know, if it's possible in your post-production budget, you should consider, or as part of your marketing budget, your festival run as well. And then, of course, you know, I mean, yours is a good example of you did get the money, but you also concentrated your movie to essentially one location and like one exterior, which allows you to kind of make the most of not having to run all over, like, say, the Southwest, you know, shooting The Lizard Laughed. So, yes. So, Rye.
Armita, do you have any tips for working with non-actors, and especially with a film like this, for creating a comfortable atmosphere on set?
Sure. Yeah. So I think it's all about communication. I feel like that's very cliche to say. And I try to sort of typecast in the sense that I try to look for the kind of, like, I try to have someone that would match the character. And also just, I really like working with like secret direction. I don't know what that would be called, but sort of like the actors only know the information that their character knows as much as possible.
Okay.
And just kind of, I really like playing with actors, and like even though I have a script, I also like having some room for improv, and sometimes during a take, I'll also give directions. Yeah, I feel like I could talk for a really long time about it, so I'm just trying to keep it short. But yeah, that's the essential.
Well, I like that. Actually, I think that gives a little bit of unique insight into what you see in the performances in your film, because I think one of the things that kind of universally people are going to say after they see it is it's insanely dry humor. Like it's bone dry humor that's going on. So there's so much there's so much non-verbal performance that's happening with your characters as well. That's like just the level of overall uncomfortableness in the room is amazing. Okay, another hand raised. Yes, right down here.
This is for Teo. I just wanted to ask you, I haven't seen your movie, I'm very interested in seeing it. What are your plans for using the movie to organize?
Let me repeat. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, my question is, what do you have plans to use this film to organize? For example, the new movements that are coming up, like Black Lives Matter or other movements. I know it's a historical film, but I was just wondering how it could inform movements now, bring about change now, help people to understand, because of what happened in the past, how they can use that now for the future.
So just to reiterate, just for the back row, how can you utilize Sunrise in the East contemporarily with movements that were happening in the United States today, like Black Lives Matter and many others?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. And, you know, what we're learning as we are, you know, this is our film school. So we're learning about how we're going to distribute this movie like every day. And what we're learning is that the sort of educational market for this film seems to be the strongest in many ways. You know, a lot of professors are reaching out to us wanting to show this to their students, both at the high school level and college level. In terms of sort of inspiring young people to show, you know, you don't need to sort of be given permission to do things, you know, working together in community with like-minded people, you can create long-lasting institutions. And so, yeah, I definitely think that this movie is for inspiring younger people. And so we really do hope that this is something that becomes part of curriculums in schools and colleges, because it's just, you know, the kind of thing that people can take little kernels from this and bring it to where they live and build. And so, you know, 100%, we think that that's what we think the purpose of this film ultimately is.
Yeah. I have a good time for one or two more questions from the audience, so don't be shy. Hi, Tori, yeah.
Yes.
Do we want to repeat just in case?
Yeah, you repeat.
And
yes, I'm happy to answer.
As gently as possible, this is a question essentially about self-care when you're telling a story that's as personal as this.
Yes. So disfluency is very personal. And I won't get like too in depth, but I was assaulted my senior year in college, and that's what the film dives into. And when we were doing the short film, I really didn't feel ready, like I mentioned, so I decided not to direct it. And I do remember the first day that we shot the short film, I like walked in the room and our actress had a bruise on her arm. And it was like the exact spot where like I had this huge bruise. And I just like walked back out and had a full-blown panic attack in the parking lot. And one of my producers came out, and one of my co-producers and was with me. And so stepping away when you really need to. When I was directing it, I really, I was doing the work for myself. I was making myself, have therapy sessions every week, even when I didn't feel like I fully needed it, or I felt okay, because I knew that I needed to prepare myself in this way. And then once we were on set with the feature, I have a close relationship now, or I built one up with my producer, who I hadn't worked with before. And I made sure to tell him, like, if I step aside, like, there might be moments where I need to, like, step out. And he totally understood. So I had people around me that knew that if I stepped out, it wouldn't be a big deal. Like, they wouldn't be like, where's Anna? What's she doing? Yeah. They would be like, Anna's, taking a phone call, or she's doing whatever. So making sure that you're protected. And also with actors, for me, it was always important that we had a really clear line of communication, and that when we were shooting the really intense scenes, like there's a police station scene in the film, and I think when you do shoot really intense content or emotional scenes, as a director, you need to respect your talent and not make them do like 15 takes.
Yeah.
So making sure that we were both on the same page, making sure that if she needed a minute, we could, step out. So communication was really big for me. And I did have a few moments on the feature where I had to step aside, and we even had to like shift the schedule just slightly, or I wasn't there for like our post meeting at the end of the day, and it was okay. And I think on all film sets having that availability, and I feel like this is broader, but disability in the film community and working on set has been a big topic of conversation, and just talking about it and bringing awareness to it, but always taking care of yourself and your crew and your cast, because we're making movies, we're not curing cancer. It's at the end of the day, or at least for, my narrative film, I will say that. So it's important to, put health and safety first always.
Yeah. I think that's something that, it is. There's so much that we've been talking about in the last 5 to 6 years that just kind of address these issues since sort of the advent of Me Too, kind of stepping fully into the mainstream, is that these sets need to be safe spaces. So, one more question.
Yeah, last year the Film Festival had a really good forum on the COVID protocols they had to follow. Did that impact your guys making films, or did you have to approach that in the budgeting process, determine how much more you needed to secure the set?
No, this is just a question about shooting in COVID, using current COVID protocols. I know some of your films were made before, so I know the answer's coming on these. But if each of you could address maybe how you handled coronavirus on your set, if that was indeed a factor. Anyone have it?
Yeah.
Because Sky is in SAG, they have very strict rules about COVID protocols. So everyone had to get tested beforehand. We had a nurse on set giving us tests like every day.
You have a COVID officer. That's what they do. Yeah.
COVID officer. And it made the film more expensive, but.
Yep.
We also, we did 18 days of principal photography in 2019 without COVID. And then we did our pickup shoots, which were 3 days in Los Angeles. And it was before vaccines. But we also followed SAG union regulations, which were very extensive and constantly changing per the conditions of COVID. So we also had a COVID compliance officer. Everyone had to get tested every day. And we brought these issues up with our investors. And, we told them it would, be a little more expensive here and there. But Los Angeles also had, I don't know if anyone's from LA or lives there now, but Dodger Stadium had free PCR COVID testing that had a pretty reliable 24-hour turnaround. So we would have our call time set to Dodger Stadium, and our, 20-person crew would, everyone got their COVID test, went to set. It was a little risky because there isn't a guarantee that you would get in 24 hours, but we didn't have the budget to pay, at the time it was like $200 or $300 per person per test. So we did take a little bit of a risk in getting the results back. But yeah, I mean, N95s, face shields, the whole deal. But we did it, and we did it safely.
Yeah, I think people think to a degree that during, say, the lockdown period that production completely stopped, but it actually didn't. Like here in Central Florida, they shot commercials constantly through the entire thing. In fact, they shot those obnoxious commercials where the couple are looking at the baby through the window like, oh, our granddaughter, and they're just like going to cry because they're so pathetic. But all of those were essentially like one director, one actor. Like you had no makeup artist. You had to wear your own clothes to set. Like they were bare bones. And in that window, SAG was writing about the most insanely extensive list of COVID restrictions.
There was like an 80-page document at one point that multiple people had to read all the way through.
Yeah. Did it affect anybody else, Kevin? I know you shot completely before.
Yeah. The worst part was it really slowed down post-production. And I couldn't be in the room for sound mixing. I couldn't sit with the colorist. Everything just had to go back and forth and be uploaded and downloaded, and it's 4K footage, and it just took forever. And then I didn't actually see the movie with its sound mix until it premiered at Dances with Films in Hollywood.
In the Chinese theater.
Yeah, which was
no stress.
But also you were sitting there and you were like, that cue doesn't work. That cue doesn't work. That needs to change.
Did you do another pass after that screening?
Well, yes.
Am I sensitive? Is it sensitive? Do you want to not talk about that?
Well, it has to do with the music, but so the sound mix you've heard is not the final mix.
Yeah. Okay.
For better or worse.
Same here. We did the same. It was a nightmare.
The way as we wrap up, maybe y'all just a little bit about where to follow you on social media or anything real quick to keep in touch, especially your Instagram handles for Black Owned Brooklyn too. So.
Yes. So the movie is at Disfluency Movie on Instagram. Disfluencymovie.com. We have all of our upcoming screenings posted there. We're having our LA special screening next week if you're in LA on Thursday the 21st. And then my personal is AnnaBaumgarten.com and Anna Bella Baum, which is also listed on Disfluency. But Disfluency Movie if you're looking for it.
The Instagram is Generation Rex. It's WRECKS, not REX. And that's pretty good about sort of updating you with what is happening with it. It's hopefully going to come out in September if we can finish the mix. And then I'm very active on Twitter, and it's Kevin T. Morales on Twitter. That's also my Instagram. I post sometimes on Instagram, but I'm very Twitter active.
For Jack Has a Plan, it's Jack Documentary, basically. So it's facebook.com/Jack Documentary.
How are you the only Jack Documentary?
Amazing. Jack Documentary.
I'm like Tim 967 letters after that.
Yeah, so Instagram and Twitter, all Jack Documentary.
Nice.
You can follow our platform at, so we have an Instagram account. We have a pretty big following in our community. It's Black Owned, at Black Owned BKLYN on Instagram. You can follow our film website. It's sunrisesintheeast.com for announcements. But yeah, please follow us on Instagram. We're doing a lot of cool things, and I hope you guys will hear more from us in the future.
It's just at The Lizard Laughed on Instagram, and My personal Instagram is alpha60 spelled out.
Cool.
My short has a Facebook page. It's called Customs Short Film, if I remember correctly. And then I have a web page, which is just my name, armitakiani.com.
Thank all of you so much for coming. Thank all of you for coming, and everybody watching on the live feed as well. You have a great festival, and we'll see you at the movies.